Where did the spinner rig come from? Well, it come from the 360 rig. Can't be right. There was only one small change, but it made all the difference.
What a result!
How do I prepare myself for a session? Well, to be honest, I'm known to be quite unorganised in my fishing. And now that's down to a few things, mainly because I sort of go on the drop of a hat nowadays. I haven't got that much time to actually go fishing, and I'm not sure what times I can go. So when I think the weather's good, or the lake's fishing well, or I've got a couple of nights, I'll get the gear together as quick as I possibly can and shoot down the lake. The only thing is I actually have to prep my bait. So it depends whether I'm using tiger nuts, whether I'm using maggots, whether I've got to get some boilies out the freezer. But apart from that, my kit's ready to go, and I'll just go as soon as I can.
Right, we're here at my current syndicate lake, Golden Gates in Essex. I've been fishing here for about 6 months now. I've had a fantastic summer's fishing on here, so it seemed like the right place to come down and show you guys how I fish the spinner rig. There's probably 300, 350 fish in here, a good head of 30 pounders, and one fish in particular that I would adore to catch, a fish called dozer. It's a common carp of over 45 pounds. So, key in hand, let's get it onto it.
Being a successful angler is all about making the right decisions at the right time. And the first decision you'll make when you get to the lake is what swimmer you're going to fish in. And now it's repeated over and over again that location is the most important part. Because if you're not on the fish, you can't catch them. So as soon as you get here, have a walk around and try and find the fish before you decide on what swim you're going to fish. What am I looking for? Well, signs of fish. So either fish just blatantly jumping out the water and telling you where they are, or something more discreet like fizzing or some clouding up of water where they're tearing up the bottom. And if you can't actually find signs of fish, what you want to try and do is just notice a pattern in where the fish were last time when the weather was the same as this. Last time I was here, the weather was absolutely a screaming southwesterly, which is exactly what we've got today, and the fish were in this swim and I caught them. So I'll give it 5 or 10 minutes in here, have a little look out and see if I can see any signs. I'll chuck my bag down, then I'll go and get my gear. I've decided to start the session fishing in a different swim than I first thought, but that's where they were showing, so that's exactly where I've started. It's next to an out of bounds area, so fish are often about. Here the rope acts as a feature, so I'll be fishing up to that in hope of stopping fish in their tracks going in and out of that zone. I get asked a lot on social media about what rig would I use in what situation. I'm fishing a weedy lake, what would you use here? I'm fishing a clay lake, what would you fish here? But to be honest, all I do is fish pretty much the same rig everywhere I go, and I just suit it to the situation. So what I mean by that is how far I push the bead up the lead core, and that is literally all I change. If I'm fishing a clay bottom, I'll push the bead right down to the lead so there isn't much movement. But if I'm fishing over something slightly softer where I think there might be some weed, I simply just push the bead up the lead core, and that is it. I think everyone thinks about the rigs too much. We've got something really, really good here with a spinner rig. Don't play around with it too much. Don't think about it too much. Just cast it out and catch a fish. For lakes with a leader band, I prefer to use a leg clip setup with dark matter tubing, as I think this is less likely to tangle. Hook baits are a very important subject, and I tend to use something very different in the summer and the autumn than I do in the spring and the winter. In the spring, I tend to use a very small hook bait, maybe 13mm, something extremely high attract in both colour and taste and smell. I tend to use a 13mm, which goes perfectly with a size 4 hook. You could use a 14, 15, 16mm with a size 2, and maybe a 10mm with a size 6. If you haven't got the buoyancy there, you can always just drill into it a little bit, put a little bit of cork so it holds the hook up perfectly. In the summer, I try and use something less high attract, something more match the hatch. So if I know that the fish are eating a lot of boilies or they're eating a lot of tiger nuts, I'm happy just to get one of them out of the bag or the bucket, drill it 2/3 of the way through, put a little bit of cork in it to give it some buoyancy, as that rig does need a little bit of buoyancy in the hook bait, and then put that on. So literally the only thing that changes is the hook bait. The rig stays exactly the same all the way through. If you prefer to fish a wafter on a D, as does Dan, we now do a D rig kicker, which means you can change the hook bait extremely quickly, and you can fish this rig in a similar vein to the IQD rig that Dan's used so well in the past. With the light fading, I quickly got the rig sorted and ready for the night. Red sky at night, shepherd's delight. The night was completely dead, so I went for a look around the lake and quickly decided on a move, back to where I caught well from on a recent trip. Let's be honest, moving seems like aggro, but it's often the key to success. Having previously fished this swim with great success, I thought this was the next best option as the fish had clearly moved on from where I'd first found them. This swim has both marginal areas and a very good open water spot, giving me the very best of both worlds. Now there seems to be a little bit of confusion or misunderstanding on who actually come up with this rig. Now I'll tell you before I start that I actually don't know myself because I know a few people at the same time were using it. Now a lot of people call this rig the Ronnie Rig, which obviously means a guy called Ronnie was fishing it a long time ago. Now I think that guy is a guy that fished Elstow and obviously was very successful with it, and a lot of people heard about that rig through him. Now, I know a guy called Johnny Barnes, JB, I'm sure a lot of you will do as well, and he was using a very, very similar style of rig probably 3 years before I even started using it, so maybe 6 or 7 years ago now, but he was whipping the hook to the top of the swivel and then putting the shrink tube over the top, which really is exactly the same as what we're using now. It's just that you can't quickly change it. And then I started using the 360, experimenting with it, and then I see what Johnny Barnes was doing and decided to do something very similar myself. So who come up with it? Not really sure, but does it really matter? I don't think so. This is the arrangement of this setup that I've decided on this trip. I'll start from the lead end. So you'll notice I've got about 12 or 14 inches of dark matter tubing there. That's just to stop any tangles and to protect the fish's flank when you're playing it. And then you've got a standard lead clip there with a 3-ounce lead on. But what I've done is I've pushed the swivel eye down, crimped it down a little bit so it doesn't clip into the lead clip quite as well, which in effect makes it a running rig. And not many people use them these days, and I think that's probably one of the reasons that it's so effective. And you'll notice as well that the boom section here isn't actually soft, which is what I'd normally fish with on a lead clip setup. But because I know I'm fishing on a very hard gravel bottom, I've managed to get away with a stiffer boom, which I think is actually better because it will kick away always and it'll be out there fishing for you. So when you know you can get away with it, try fishing a stiffer boom. And then on the end here, you've got a size 4 crank on a standard spinner setup with a small swivel on the shank, and a 15, probably 15 or 16 mil hook bait drilled out with a little bit of cork in the end just to give it some buoyancy. And that's my preferred setup for this time of year. Nothing too complicated and a standard out of the bag bottom bait. I'm using a prototype boilie from Mainline Baits called the Link. It's been hugely successful across some of the hardest waters in the country, and I'm lucky enough to get to use it before its general release in spring 2018. It's September, it's boiling month, so that's exactly what I'm using on this session. But to be perfectly honest, I've used this rig with pretty much every bait there is out there. I've used it with particle in the summer, I've even used it with maggots, I've used it with a bit of corn, and I've used it with boilies as I am here. So I wouldn't go worrying that your baiting situation doesn't suit this rig, because you really can use it with everything. It's got all aspects that you need for a rig in any situation, and that means it kicks out, it spins round and it catches hold no matter what. So I really wouldn't worry about it. I think a lot of people would tend to shorten their hook link down a little bit when they're fishing over a hard bottom and fishing with particle, but I've tried that before. When we was in Croatia, I cut the hook link down from 7 inches to about 3 inches just to try, see if I got any quicker bites. I got the same amount of bites, but I lost 2 fish on the bounce. So I went back to the 7 inches and caught them, didn't lose anything, and it was perfect from then on. So don't worry about it, and you can use it with any bait. The fish aren't particularly playing ball at the moment. We started off the session down the complete opposite end of the lake where fish were showing in the beginning, and pretty much as soon as I cast out, them fish moved. And it wasn't long before I realised that they weren't there anymore. So, not being one to wait around, I've decided on a move myself. So I come into a swim called the Cut, which is probably 2/3 of the way up the lake. I've caught from this swim before when the weather's exactly like this. So I moved in here in hope really that the fish would be here. Again, it's not been long and we've realised they're not here. I haven't received any liners, I haven't seen any shows of fish, and it just feels a little bit dead. And with it being September, really, if you're on the fish, you should be catching. So I'm gonna have another move again. With the cameraman here, I've been lucky enough to be able to have a little mooch around this afternoon. I've gone into a couple of swims up and I've seen a fish jump out right on an area where I know they are in the autumn. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna up sticks and get on that fish now. So hopefully we'll get a fish on the bank and show you this rig. It's so important to keep your eyes open and not to remain static at this time of the year. The carp are often moving around and looking to feed up before the cold weather sets in. So don't be afraid to move on instinct. You have nothing to lose and it's often worth the hassle. Well, we got to the right swim in the end. The fish are out here. We heard one earlier on in the dark. I'm not sure what time it is, but there is a massive full moon out tonight. And legend has it that big commons get caught when the full moon's out. So we're in the right swim, we've got the right rigs on. So why not let it happen? Really strange, normally I get liners at this lake before I get a bite. I've been sitting there all evening, not a bleep, and it just decides to ramp off. It's a nice little surprise that. It's been tough going so far this session. But like we said, the location is the key point, and after the location you can start thinking about all the other important things like the rigs and the bait, but getting in the right swim is just so important. I hadn't done it before now. Full moon carp in the net. I'm a happy man. Do you know what? I was starting to think we wouldn't catch one. Starting to worry. That is quite a big fish. That can't be right. 35.4. Is that the elusive?
Yeah, it's elusive.
Well, this is a fish called the elusive. It was caught not so long ago at 33 pounds something, and now it's 35 pounds. It's actually the second biggest, is it the second biggest mirror in here?
Second biggest mirror, I would say now, mate.
Yeah. What an absolute touch that is. I didn't expect that after a little bit of a grueler to have caught one of the real big uns in here. Look at that. I think we got the location right in the end, and this really does just prove that if you don't feel right in the swim, you don't think the fish are there, move, because it really does make a difference. This fish is called the elusive. It's one of the bigger mirrors in the lake. Just over, I think it was a smidgen over 35 pounds, and I'm over the moon because this is one of the A-team and one of the ones you joined for. So I'm a very, very happy man, and what a wicked way to go into the night. It's a massive full moon out tonight. It just feels right for it. It really does. Carpy is what they say, I think. I'm absolutely buzzing. Let's get him back, this old creature. Catching one of the A-team is such a buzz, and having some friends there to share the moment is what it's all about.
the results.
Just after putting the mirror back, I caught this tiny little common, again proving that putting the right rig in the right place is all you need for a brilliant night's fishing. The essence of this rig and the reason why I think it's so good is because that hook is connected directly to the swivel. Now that means a few things. Firstly, it means as soon as it goes into the fish's mouth, it's spinning and trying to catch hold. Secondly, it means that you can change the hook without having to tie a new rig. Now that is really, really handy in my eyes. And thirdly, it means that you can fish a small pop-up really close to the bottom with a big hook. And again, when that goes into the fish's mouth, it's dangerous because it's almost all hook. What hooks can you use with this rig? Well, I've almost exclusively used it with a size 4 crank. That is because I have extreme confidence in that hook. Now I know that Dan's used them, I think, with size 4 curves and wide gapes, and you'll notice a bit of a trend there that we use quite big hooks with this rig. A lot of people will probably tell you to use a size 6 or a 4 with an 18mm bait and down from there, whereas I'd almost say use a size 4 hook or a 2 hook with a 10 or 12mm bait if it's buoyant enough to pick up the hook. You could also use a long shank on this as well, anything with an in-turned eye really. If you've got an out-turned eye like you have on a choddy, I'd suggest not to use it because it doesn't fit onto the swivel very well, it doesn't sit right, and when it goes into the fish's mouth, the hook point won't be in the right position to catch hold. Now for you European boys, you could also use it with the X versions of the hook, and I'd go all the way up to a size 2, maybe with a 14 or a 16mm pop-up. So it really is as versatile as you like. As far as the lead arrangement goes for this setup, I'd always prefer to use it on a helicopter setup with lead core and a stiff boom. Now this means that as long as I've pushed that bead far enough up the lead core, 1, I'm not going to get any tangles because of stiff boom, and 2, when it lands on the bottom, it's going to be sitting above any debris on the bottom and it's going to sit there proud, ready for a take. Of course, you can just fish this naked on the line without the lead core, but I'm so worried about tangles that I'd just prefer to fish it with some lead core or tubing. So instead of that, if I'm not allowed to use lead core, which there are lots of bans on certain lakes, I'll just tend to go back to a lead clip setup. You can fish this on a hybrid lead clip, or you can fish it running as I am here today. I tend to fish it running more so these days because less people do it and it's a bit of a change. If I am fishing with a lead clip setup, I'll make sure that I'll have a soft boom, something like 15-pound end trap and maybe 8 to 10 inches long. This means that if the lead does plummet into the bottom or if there's any debris there, it'll just curl over and sit on top of anything and be presented ready for a bite. Where would you not use the spinner rig? Well, this list is far shorter than where you can use it, as it is so versatile. I would say because there's lots of components and you've got some small quick change swivels on there, I wouldn't use it in extreme snag situations or somewhere where you're using braid and it's hit and hold. It is very strong, but in them situations you want something that is definitely not going to let you down. So I would tend to use it pretty much anywhere else but there. To tie the spinner rig, firstly, grab a medium kicker and cut 2 or 3mm off of the end of the parallel part, not the tapered part. Then grab your hook, in this instance a size 4 crank, thread the flat part onto the hook first, which is eventually going to go over the swivel. Then put your mini rig swivel onto the hook and follow that with a bead flat end first. The bead you need to push around almost in line with the barb, and then the next thing to do is to hook the swivel onto the hook. You can either use a quick change swivel or a spinner rig swivel. All that's left now to do at this part is to slide the kicker over the swivel. Because you've cut a little bit off, there should be half of the kicker on the swivel and half the kicker on the hook. For a stiff boom, I tend to cut the ring off of the quick change swivel and I'll crimp a loop in the boom and then tie a boom 7 inches long and crimp another loop in the other end of the boom, which then allows you to put it onto a quick change swivel on your lead core or on your lead clip. For a softer boom, I'll use 15 or 20 pound end trap soft, and I'll tie that with a 4 or 5 turn grinner directly to the ring on the quick change ring swivel, and I'll tie that off at the other end with a figure of 8 loop knot at about 8 or 9 inches long. The putty can be added in 2 different places on this rig. First of all, if you're fishing it as normal with a pop-up, I'd add the putty to the crimp at the quick change swivel end, and then if I'm using a soft hook link, I'll put a little dab of putty about 2 or 3 inches down from the figure of 8 loop knot, just to make sure that that's all kept on the bottom. Well, if I'm honest, it hasn't been one of the easiest sessions I've had down here this year, but we moved and we moved and we moved, and eventually we found the fish. And to be honest, the elusive at over 35 pounds was one of my highlights of this year. It's one of the fish I wanted to catch, and it's one of the A team of this lake. So it does just go to show that you've got to put a lot of effort into finding the fish. Location is key, but if once you find them, you put the right rig and the right bait in front of them, you can have a good session. So even though now we've got everything right, and I'm sure if we stayed another night, we'd catch a couple more, it's time to go home. Not long after filming, I managed to take a night off of work and get myself a 3-night session in. Now, the weather was absolutely perfect. There was a full moon again. Bulldozer was due out, and I just had a feeling it was going to get caught that weekend. So I started off my trip in the front bay because not many people had been fishing that swim, and apparently there were a lot of fish in there. So I started there, I'd done a night, didn't catch anything, and it just didn't feel right. Now, Jay Willis had caught, I think, 6 or 7 or maybe more fish out of the back bay the weekend before. So I knew, going off of the back of that information, that if I moved into that swim that there'd be fish there as well. So I moved at about 5 o'clock in the morning from the front bay all the way around to the back bay to get myself in there plotted up for the weekend. I had 3 bites during the day that day, so it was obvious that the move was worth it. I had a 26 pounder about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, which was obviously lovely. It was one actually that I'd caught before, but I slipped that back, put the rod back out, put a couple of more spots back out, and went back to bed. And then woke at first light to an absolute ripping take on the same rod again. Bundled the fish into the net, looking, and there it is, a 45-pound common. It is such a buzz catching your target fish. There's something really special about catching the very biggest fish in the lake. You know, before you join the lake, or even when you're on there, you're talking it up with your mates, you're talking about the fish all the time, you're looking at old pictures of the fish, and basically you're building up to that moment of hopefully catching it. Now, sometimes it takes years and years and years to catch a fish that big, and it has done for me in the past. At Walthamstow at 2 and 3, I fished that lake for probably 7 years and never caught a big common in there. But luckily, here I think I've caught maybe 24 or 25 fish and managed to catch the big one pretty quick. So I had a very, very good time on Golden Gates. It was a massive buzz catching that big fish. And if I'm honest, it's a bit of a shame really that I can't go back, because to go back and catch it again would take away a capture from someone else and ruin it for me. So thanks to all of the lads on there for all of the good times, but for me now, it's on to a new challenge.